Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Millerman, millermanschool.com. I wanted to share with you something briefly from this book. Whoops. The Two Sources of Morality and Religion by Bergson. This came up in one of our streams recently. If you remember, there was a letter that Leo Strauss and that Vogelin wrote to Leo Strauss about Karl Popper's Open Society and Its Enemies, where he mentioned that Popper takes the notion of the open and closed society from this book, The Two Sources of Morality and Religion. I hadn't read the book, so I thought it'd be helpful to read it. I'm about midway through, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to share with you because I think you might find it interesting. So first, for Bergson, there's two fundamental impulses at play that he discusses: instinct and intelligence. And he says a couple of things about religion and its relationship to instinct and intelligence that I thought we could look at. So let me go to page 122. Just give you a few quick formulations. This isn't going to be an hour-long stream. We're not going to go everything that he's said so far in his book, but just a few quick key ideas. So if you look at this italicized phrase, let me try to get that up on screen for you. You see where it says here, looked at from this first point of view, religion is a defensive reaction of nature against the dissolvent power of intelligence. So as I mentioned, he has this idea that we have a natural instinct, like all creatures, like all beings do, like ants and bees do. Man too has a natural instinct. And our natural instinct has a society forming component to it. And nature, as it were, intended our societies and our moralities to be closed. But against instinct, there's the operation of intelligence. Intelligence is not rigorously distinct from instinct. It's shot through with the residues of instinct. But intelligence can go in a different direction than instinct does. So, for example, to use one of the examples he gives earlier in the book, it's kind of like inventing birth control, condoms, and so on in order to separate sexual pleasure from procreation. So maybe nature intends that sex is procreative, but man's intelligence can decouple the procreative end of a copulation from its pleasure, and you have basically the influence of intelligence on instinct. So how does instinct reassert itself in the face of the, quote, dissolvent power of intelligence? Well, one of the ways that he analyzes the reassertion of instinct, or as he puts it here, the defensive reaction of nature against the dissolvent power of intelligence, is religion. It's kind of an interesting idea. It would be all the more interesting if I could give you the full context, but the book is too long, and I just wanted to give you a first impression. So that's one thing he says about religion. It's the defensive reaction of nature against the dissolvent power of intelligence. Then there's another formulation. One second. Let me just get it in my copy, and then I'll put it on screen. Okay, 131. That is here. So look at this other italicized formulation. Let me get it up nice and big. So he looks from another perspective, develops another account of religion's relationship to instinct, nature, and so on. And here he puts the following. From the second standpoint, religion is a defensive reaction of nature against the representation by intelligence of the inevitability of death. So he has this analysis that animals don't contemplate their death. They're not anxious about the impending death in quite the same way as humans can be and as human intelligence is. And so how does nature or instinct reassert its kind of stable, structured order against the representation of the inevitability of death that intelligence produces? Well, religion has to do with that. So religion in both of these formulations for Bergson, again, I'm skipping a lot of the argumentation, a lot of the context, just to maybe intrigue you with these little short version formulations. Religion is a defensive reaction of nature and instinct against some work of intelligence, because intelligence itself has something anti-natural about it. Intelligence itself is a kind of war against nature that isn't always good. So those are two formulations. I think there's another one, and then something else that relates instinct and intelligence to mysticism, which is a topic that we've mentioned on this channel before and that maybe interests you. So let me go to one more. This is page 140. 1 second. Because I have my volume, but I wanted to make sure you have something on screen as well. So let me go over to 140. Okay. We'll go here and here. Okay. I'll put this up for you, get it in there like that, like that. Okay. So here, wait, it's too much. Here he says that all the religious representations which arise directly from the vital impulse might be defined in the same way. And the vital impulse for him is equivalent roughly to instinct and to nature. All the religious representations which arise directly from it might then be defined in the same way. They are defensive reactions of nature. See that formulation there again? It's so important for him in understanding religion in this part of the book. They are defensive reactions of nature against the representation by the intelligence. So once again, they're defensive reactions of nature against intelligence, of a depressing margin of the unexpected between the initiative taken and the effect desired. Let me just explain that. There's something that you did it for a certain reason, but the reason may not come about in the way that you wanted it to. There's a gap between your initiative and your desired effect. And sometimes that gap can be a, quote, depressing margin. And intelligence represents to itself that depressing margin between initiative and effect. And religion fills the gap somehow. It removes the sting. It, for Bergson, invokes the idea of providence or of God's plan, and somehow blunts the edge of this depressing margin of the unexpected between the initiative taken and the effect desired. So in all of these three formulations, which is one of the things I wanted to share with you, and these three formulations of Bergson, you got to start to get a sense. You have instinct, which is how all animals live by instinct. Man has, in addition, intelligence. But man's intelligence sometimes doesn't really understand the proper role of instinct, what's good about it, what's inherited about it, how it functions to order our societies, and how we always somehow know what to do even without the help of intelligence. And intelligence starts to kind of go to war against instinct in some way by the representation of the gap between intention and outcome, by the representation of the fear of death, like he said, and so on. And religion reasserts itself against the dissolutive effects of intelligence. So pretty good. And then another argument from the book that I wanted to give you, I'll go over to page 99. This is, again, Bergson, The Two Sources of Morality and Religion. And there's another argument that just very briefly, again, this isn't going to be an hour-long stream like our other ones. I wanted just to give you something here to chew on quickly here about true mystics. So let me just say this pretty briefly. Nature and natural instinct has intended man to live together in closed societies, in closed communities, not in a universal world society. But where then has man derived the idea of a universal world society from? Where has he derived the aspiration towards a universal world society? What is it in us and about us that goes beyond nature's intention that we live in closed societies? Well, there are two answers, so to speak. One is a kind of rationalism, a universalist rationalism that tries to go above the particular, above the closed, and to include all mankind under a universality of reason. It's kind of rationalistic ethics. And for Bergson, if I've understood him correctly, because I'm just reading him for the first time, for Bergson, that is a completely mistaken and distorting attempt of reason and of intelligence to go, again, as it were, to go to war against instinct and nature. But here's the beautiful thing. It has a profound source beyond universal rationalism. In fact, universal rationalism is a reflection of a deeper mystic impulse. The deeper mystic impulse that hits upon some basis of our shared humanity. But then rationalism hollows out, as it were, the mystic insight, and it leaves you with a barren rationalism, a barren universal rationalism. So rationalist universality falls short of both nature's intended outcome of a closed society and of the deep wellsprings of mystical inspiration, hitting upon neither of them, which I thought was pretty intriguing. So let me just read you a little part of that. You can see this on screen, maybe about the middle of your screen. Let me see how we can get it up there. So he's talking here about mystics. And again, the mystic experience as having something to do with breaking through the barriers of the closed, natural, instinctive society, but without being primarily a rationalism. True mystics simply open their souls to the oncoming wave, okay, in mystic experience. Sure of themselves because they feel within them something better than themselves, they prove to be great men of action, to the surprise of those for whom mysticism is nothing but visions and raptures and ecstasies. That which they have allowed to flow into them is a stream flowing down and seeking through them to reach their fellow men. The necessity to spread around them what they have received affects them like an onslaught of love. You know, the cup runneth over. It's an overabundance that must pour out of itself. Incidentally, not unlike Nietzsche's Zarathustra, the first part of the first book of Nietzsche's Zarathustra. A love which each one of them stamps with his own personality. A love which is in each of them an entirely new emotion, capable of transposing human life into another tone. A love which thus causes each of them to be loved for himself, so that through him and for him, other men will open their souls to the love of humanity. A love which can be just as well passed on through the medium of a person who has attached himself to them or to their evergreen memory and formed his life on that pattern. In other words, the mystics, with their overabundance of love, which drives them beyond themselves into a life of action, they become a kind of model, a non-rationalistic model for emulation. And both the mystic experience and those who emulate the way of the mystic, they have hit upon something, to repeat the main point here, that goes beyond the closed society of instinct and nature, which is, again, pretty intriguing. Okay, let's go a little bit further and then we'll stop. What does Bergson say next here? If a word of a great mystic or some one of his imitators finds an echo in one or another of us, may it not be that there's a mystic dormant within us, merely waiting for an occasion to awake? In the first case, a person attaches himself to the impersonal and aims at finding room inside it. Here he responds to the call of a personality, perhaps that of a revealer of moral life or one of his imitators, or even in certain circumstances his own. So you resonate with a mystic message. Maybe you resonate with the message, but maybe you resonate with the personality. Whichever of these two methods be adopted, in both cases, the foundations of human nature have been taken into account, whether considered statically in itself or dynamically in its origin. So he writes about static religion and dynamic religion in this book. So here I'll stop because it was really just that role of the mystic that I thought was unexpected. I didn't know that he invokes the mystic as one of the sources of the morality of, as it were, the open society, or something more than natural, more than instinctive. So if you ever get a chance, look at this book. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it so far, and it's helping me to understand something about the roots of the argument of the open and closed society. Also, I guess, I could read you one other little thing if you want while we're here together from this book, which is this. In chapter 2 on static religion. Let me read you this, I guess. So, maybe I'll just summarize it. He's trying to analyze the quote unquote primitive tendency to attribute to natural events religious cause or significance, okay, in a nutshell. And as he walks through this, he says, look, don't think that it's only primitive societies, quote unquote, that do this. Not at all. In fact, all of us, even in contemporary modern societies, all of us have this activity of interpreting natural events in a specifically religious way. And remember that in his analysis, his point is to show that religion is the reassertion of, it provides a stability that intelligence tries to interrupt. So in making this point, he mentions something about William James, an account that William James gave of an earthquake. If you guys know William James, varieties of religious experience and so on, and it's kind of nice. So let me read you what he says that William James wrote on this subject of our consciousness reacting to an aggression of nature. Okay, I'm going to read you what he's quoting William James. When I departed from Harvard for Stanford, I should probably just put this on screen, right? 154, so that you don't have to look at me. 154. Okay. It's obviously way too small. All right, whatever, I'll do it like this. When I departed from Harvard for Stanford University last December, almost the last goodbye I got was that of my old Californian friend B. I hope they'll give you a touch of earthquake while you're there so that you may also become acquainted with that Californian institution. So his friend is like, I hope there's an earthquake when you go. Accordingly, when lying awake at about 5:30 on the morning of April 18th in my little flat on the campus of Stanford, I felt the bed begin to waggle. My first consciousness was one of gleeful recognition of the nature of the movement. Okay, so he actually does find himself in an earthquake. And the moment he feels it, he starts to feel kind of a gleeful recognition. Is a weird feeling to feel an earthquake. By Jove, I said to myself, here's B's old earthquake after all. And then as it went crescendo, and a jolly good one it is too, I said. The thing was over, as I understand the Lick Observatory to have declared, in 48 seconds. So a 48-second earthquake. To me, it felt as if about that length of time, although I've heard others say it seemed to them longer. In my case, sensation and emotion were so strong that little thought and no reflection or volition were possible in the short time consumed by the phenomenon. The emotion consisted wholly of glee and admiration. Glee at the vividness which such an abstract idea or verbal term as earthquake could put on when translated into sensible reality and verified concretely. Like you've heard the word earthquake, and then you experience an earthquake, and you're sort of in awe at the translation from the abstract word to the concrete reality. Admiration at the way in which the frail little wooden house could hold itself together in spite of such a shaking. I felt no trace whatever of fear. It was pure delight and welcome. Imagine that. Through an earthquake, pure delight and welcome. Go it, I almost cried aloud, and go it stronger. As soon as I could think, I discerned retrospectively certain peculiar ways in which my consciousness had taken in the phenomenon. So now we're at the analysis, okay? That's what happened, but he wants to know what can we learn about the way consciousness deals with natural events? These ways were quite spontaneous and, so to speak, inevitable and irresistible. First, I personified the earthquake as a permanent individual entity. It was the earthquake, my friend B's augury, which had been lying low and holding itself back during all the intervening months in order on that lustrous April morning to invade my room and energize the more intensely and triumphantly. So it's like, it's not just an earthquake. He personifies the event. It's this earthquake. It's a specific event with a specific personality that you had almost been awaiting and that you almost welcome in his case, weirdly enough. It came, moreover, directly to me. It stole in behind my back, and once inside the room had me all to itself and could manifest itself convincingly. Animus and intent were never more present in any human action, nor did any human activity ever more definitely point back to a living agent as its source and origin. So he experienced the earthquake as having agency, personality, individuality. Okay? All whom I consulted on the point agreed as to this feature in their experience. It expressed intention. It was vicious. It was bent on destruction. It wanted to show its power or whatnot. To me, he says, it wanted simply to manifest the full meaning of its name, earthquake. But what was this it? To some, apparently, a vague demonic power. To me, an individualized being. One informant interpreted it as the end of the world and the beginning of the final judgment. This was a lady in a San Francisco hotel who did not think of its being an earthquake till after she had got into the street and someone had explained it to her. She told me that the theological interpretation had kept fear from her mind and made her take the shaking calmly. You know this phenomenon, right? Something horrible is happening, but if you have a religious interpretation of it, it can give you a certain sort of peace if you think you know what it is or recognize it as what it is, divine retribution or punishment or a sign or a message or a portent or something like that. She told me that the theological interpretation had kept fear from her mind and made her take the shaking calmly. For quote unquote science, when the tensions in the Earth's crust reach the breaking point and strata fall into an altered equilibrium, earthquake is simply the collective name of all the cracks and shakings and disturbances that happen. They are the earthquake. But for me, William James says, the earthquake was the cause of the disturbances, and the perception of it as a living agent was irresistible. I realize now better than ever how inevitable were man's earlier mythological versions of such catastrophes and how artificial and against the grain our spontaneous perceiving are the latter habits into which science educates us. So in other words, it's not primitive to interpret natural events religiously, to give them agency, to give them, what was the other word he used here? Hold on. Intention. It's not a feature of quote unquote primitive societies. It's a underlying natural instinct. And when we do so in religious terms, again, to repeat what I said in the start of the stream, it's religion is nature's revenge on intelligence, so to speak. Pretty, anyway, I'm really enjoying this. So this is what I'm reading. The two sources of morality and religion. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you. So I'm going to pop over into the chat. William, thanks. I'm glad to hear you're enjoying this. Nigel, would I be open to reading some of Jacques Maritain's political thought, especially in relation to Bergson? Yeah, as I develop a better understanding of Bergson, because I haven't read much of him, so I prefer not to comment until I know more. And all the more so Maritain. I might have read something of his a long time ago as an undergraduate, but certainly nothing I'd feel confident in discussing until I know it better. Okay, and then up here, hello Millerman. It was funny how the idiot internet defined beauty. I thought it was funny. Anyway, yeah. That was from the earlier stream on Plato, on the greater Hippias, and on the question, what is the beautiful? Thanks, I'm glad you like the channel. I'm always of two minds about doing spontaneous streams and article readings and things as opposed to highly produced videos. Not that I do highly produced videos, but ones that take more time. The last produced video I made was on jiu-jitsu, which I've mentioned on the channel. I'm about 8 months into training jiu-jitsu, a couple months off for injury. And these live streams, they do better. They get more viewers and they're more fun. They're easier to make. And they're more spontaneous. But from time to time, I'll still put out the more produced videos. Do like, share, subscribe, and all of that. Visit millermanschool.com. There's an introduction to philosophy, free 30-day introduction, a bunch of courses, and so on. And I'll like to share with you when I read something new that we haven't discussed before and that I think you might enjoy. So there you go. That's this short 23-minute stream. Great to be with you. Thanks for being here. Take care. Bye.